How do you annotate special editions of a book that include full-page photos as well as digital annotations? That is exactly what we're talking about today, because for my Kickstarter for my book, Sparks in Iceland, I offer special editions. We have the paperback book, which offers black and white photos and sprayed edges, and then we also have the deluxe hardcover, which offers color photos, sprayed edges, custom end papers, so many other things. But the deluxe edition also comes as a digitally annotated copy, which means there's spots in the margins where I've written some notes. I've also underlined some stuff, put in fun facts about Iceland, and all of you guys were wondering how exactly I did that, so I'm doing a full tutorial today. And if you want to support my book on Kickstarter, you can do so now. The Kickstarter ends July 29th. This is a friends to lovers sweet romance. It is a rom-com where we see what happens when two lifelong friends share a bed and are forced to finally confront their feelings. The Kickstarter will be linked down below, and it'll mean so much to me if you go ahead and support the project. But otherwise, if you're just here to learn how to do some advanced formatting, such as adding photos into your book as well as adding digital annotations, be sure to stay tuned. Hello everyone, my name is Mandi Lynn. I'm an author, the creator of the Book Launch Planner series, and I also have courses on book cover design and book formatting. I make weekly videos on the business of being an author, so if that sounds good to you, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification icon so you never miss a new upload. You can also become a YouTube member to get behind the scenes access as well as early access to videos. So like I already said, today is more of an advanced video, and we are using the software Adobe InDesign. This software is the same software that I use in my book formatting course. So this information will be best for those of you who have already taken my book formatting course, because I'm not talking about the basics of formatting a book. I'm talking about the more advanced side of taking an already formatted book and adding these extra things into them to make your book even more special for when you want to do these special editions. And we're also only going to be talking about our interior files today. So as you can see for my book, we have foil on the cover, we have end papers, we have sprayed edges, and I will be covering in a different video how I formatted all of this on Bookvul and how I went ahead to print it, but today we're only talking about the interior files. So your first step is going to be to format as usual. So that is why I am in Adobe InDesign here. And like I said, if you took my course that I have, it'll be linked down below. You will learn how to do all this basic formatting for your novel. And basically, once you format your book, it should look a little something like this, where we have the front matter with the copyright page, we have a list of books already published, no newsletter info, and then the book itself starts. And it's very basic, nothing fancy. This is just the basic paperback that you would publish on KDP or something like that. But we want to go ahead and we want an annotated copy of our book. So let's assume you went ahead and you formatted your book and you printed a proof copy so you can physically hold it. That's where step 2 comes in, which is to annotate your copy of your book. So I went ahead, this was before I even finished the final touches on my cover. I printed a copy of my book and I just annotated the physical copy. If you can see, I don't know if you can, but there's a lot of doodles and writing in the margins because I physically annotated it. What I did after this was I then went into my Word document and annotated it in the Word document to add in all of my comments. I didn't worry about spots where I just underlined text. I only added in comments for where I wrote something in the margins. And this was mostly just to spell check myself. And if you really want to, you can skip the physical step of annotating and annotate everything digitally by going into Microsoft Word and highlighting stuff and adding in comments using the comments feature. But I personally just found it was easier to annotate using a physical copy of the book. Now let's move on to step 3, which is to find and edit your photos. So my book obviously featured a ton of photos because these are photos that I took when I personally went on my honeymoon honeymoon in Iceland. And basically, anytime I mentioned somewhere in the book that I'd physically been to, I kind of marked the page and was like, add a photo in here. And once I knew I wanted photos in certain spots, I went ahead and searched out those photos and made sure that they would kind of fit. As you can see, portrait photos work best. This is great if you take photos on a cell phone because it just works with the size of the page of the book great, but you can still work in those landscape photos. Now, rather than just plopping in a photo, I actually added this cool little like ripped paper effect to the bottom of the photo, or vice versa. If the photo was on the bottom of the page, the ripped paper effect was added to the top of the photo. That way it's just a little more visually interesting. To give you guys a little bit of a better idea of what I ended up doing to my photos, I wanted to show you all my photos so we can see I have all my photos here and they're in a folder called edited photos because this is all of the done, finished, ready to be printed photos. And basically what I would do is I would open each of them one by one in Adobe Photoshop, and I would create this paper effect because I had purchased a Photoshop brush that actually created this effect. So we can see over here I have this folder called Torn Paper Brushes. Unfortunately, I don't remember where I purchased it from, but if you Google that, I'm hoping it would pop up. But if you just select any of the brushes, you can kind of see this effect here, and you just want to make sure that the brush is set to eraser. So let me select that again. And then if I go ahead and just erase part of my photo, you can see that torn effect is applied. And then to make it pop even more, what I ended up doing was I clicked on the layer and I added a very slight drop shadow to it. Now you can see up here, I had already done the drop shadow once, so it made it just overly dramatic. But down here, it's a little more subtle. And if you want to see what it looks like on a printed book, just add in another layer, set the background to white, and you can kind of see how that would look when it's printed in your book when it's not transparent. But I would just export it as transparent, but of course this all looks ridiculous because I've already done this. But I just wanted to show you guys how I made that torn paper effect. Now, besides adding that torn paper effect, I also went ahead and I increased the brightness on all of my photos. And that is because when things get printed, typically they print a little darker than the way you want them to look. So I, by default, always brighten up all of my photos. As you can see here, this photo is in color because the hardback edition of Sparks in Iceland is a completely color edition, whereas the paperback book is black and white. So I had to do this twice, where I had one set of photos that is in color, that is this set of photos, but then I have another set of photos which is this set of photos, and these are all photos that I edited one by one to be black and white. I didn't want to do a default black and white setting. I wanted to make sure each setting I did for black and white looked good for that particular photo. So this was very time intensive, but I think it was well worth it. And you guys can let me know what you think when you physically get the copies of the book, because again, I hope you support the Kickstarter. Let's move on to step 4, which is placing our photos in the document itself. So again, here we are in Adobe InDesign. I'm not going to be doing this formatting live with you guys because this was a very intensive process, but basically I'm going to show you guys what I did and talk you guys through how I did it. So we can see here, this is the photo that we just were editing in Photoshop. And basically, before I placed this photo in the document, it looked like this. This is what this page looked like. You know, the text went all the way down, but I knew I wanted the photo to be on the bottom half of this page. So all I had to do was move the text box up a bit, and then I placed the photo in Adobe InDesign. Now, the way you place photos is you go to File, you go to Place, you find your photo, and then you basically draw a text box, and there it is, and you can resize it and place it however you would like. So it's actually extremely easy to place photos into your Adobe InDesign novel. Now, what I do want to note here is you can see this is where the page ends, but this is the setting for our bleed. And we are doing a full bleed export on this book to make sure that the photos go edge to edge and that they're cut and they look beautiful when it's printed. So make sure that your photo goes all the way to the bleed, that it doesn't just stop at the page. And you can see that's happening at the bottom of the page as well as at the edges of the page. And you can also see that's happening for this full page photo, not just for these half smaller photos. You can also see I added this little extra text box here, and this is just labeling the location of the photo. This is the name of the church that you see in this photo. I'm not even going to bother trying to say it because I know I can't. And to make your life easier, make sure you make everything a paragraph style. So if you've taken my Adobe InDesign course, you know that the thing that makes Adobe InDesign so awesome is their paragraph styles. So you can see I have a lot going on here. Typically for a novel, you'll have things like body text, scene center, chapter header, character, drop text, no indent. Those are all very basic things, but you can also see I added these extra ones here that are for annotating, and the one I'm using currently is this one called photo labels. That way I make sure everything throughout the book, formatting wise, matches. So every single photo label like this is using the same paragraph style. Let's move on to step 5, which is adding special chapter headers. So here we have a 2-page chapter header. You can see it with chapter 1, where we have just the left page is quite literally just graphics, and the right page is just a small extension of those graphics. Now again, if you've taken my book formatting course before, you know that one of the best features about Adobe InDesign is this thing called parent pages. Because we just create a parent page, which is a template, which is this right here. This is our parent page. If you missed that, I clicked on the pages options right here, and this is our template. It's called A-chapter-right. And this is just an image that I designed in Photoshop. It's basically just graphics I took from my book cover, and I made it super simple. I added a white background, and I also wanted to make sure it looks good with text over it. But I designed this first in Photoshop, then I exported it and placed it in Adobe InDesign, which you can see here, and that adds this graphic to any page that I apply this parent page to. So if we click back to chapter 1 where we were earlier, we can see that parent page is applied. And you know it's applied because we see this little A on the little corner of our page. And all the other pages have the label B. And if we look back up here, we can see these labels A and B. So if we double click B, we can see this is our master page. And this is just the page that has our page numbers and the page that has our headers such as our name and the book title. So technically when I started, it didn't have this already applied to it. It had the other one. So let me just apply that one. This is technically what it looked like when I got started. But to apply that fancy chapter header, all I have to do is make sure I have my page selected right here, and then I right click, I hit apply to parent pages, and then I set it for the A one that I was talking about earlier, and then I hit OK, and you can see that applies. Now, if I ever wanted to change this, like I can add in just a random text box like that, we can also see it automatically changes everywhere. So even if I scroll all the way down to chapter 1, we can see that same change there. But of course, why would we want that random text box? We don't, so I'm going to delete it. That is how simple it is to do parent pages in Adobe InDesign and to create these amazing chapter spreads for your book. Now you can also see sometimes a chapter ended and I was left with just a blank page because in order to have this double page spread, I would need to add in this blank page, but I didn't want to have a blank page. So I added in this little illustration, and this illustration is actually the black and white edition of the end papers that are on my book. And again, this is just a parent page. So if we click here, this one is labeled as C, chapter left. I don't know why I labeled it that way, but I know in my mind that that's what I need. And this is just another image that I added to a parent page. I go through all this way more in depth in the course, so if this is confusing, that's why. But for those of you who've already taken my course, this is just review info. Now let's move on to step number 6, which is adding our annotations. So adding annotations was actually a lot easier than I thought it would be. Let me zoom in and we can see for this spot here, I underlined some text and I just added this text box. So for the part of the book where it says, I learned just how quickly money disappeared once I gave myself the permission to spend it. So I underlined that and I added this little comment, this trait is based off of me. I know, embarrassing, right? So all I did to do this was I had a line, so I used the line tool and I just underlined like so. And I wasn't even like super exact about it. You can see I didn't make sure the line was perfectly straight. I just was kind of eyeballing it and doing it quickly because annotations are kind of meant to be messy. They aren't meant to be perfect. So I didn't worry about my lines being perfectly straight. And then I just added a new text box, which you can do super easily by clicking our text tool and drawing a little text box. And I can just add in a note. And if I just highlight all that and I go to my paragraph tool, which I lost, there it is. And I have different paragraph styles for different annotations. So we have our default annotations, which is this pink. We have our annotations for behind the scenes, which is this blue. And we have our annotations for fun facts about Iceland, which is like this light purple. So that's all I would do is I would draw this text box, put in my text, highlight it, and then change the paragraph style depending on what type of annotation it was. And if it was an annotation that, like here, we have this perfect spot for this annotation, but sometimes there wouldn't be a perfect spot, so I would have to rotate it and put it off to the margins here. Now, the only issue with adding annotations in the margins, you don't want it too close to the end of the page because then you do risk getting it cropped when it is printed, so you just have to be mindful of that. Then every now and then you see a doodle in the annotations. This is a little doodle. This is just an image. It's actually a stock image that was a part of the stock illustrations that were used to create the end papers for the book. So this, if you look at this little, it's hot spring, you can kind of see what it is there. You can also see this illustration in the end papers of the book. So because I already had that illustration, I just ended up adding it in as an annotation, but you can also see there's some spots in the book where I added little hearts. There was a bunch of hearts that I added in. Again, those were just stock illustrations that I found because I'm self-conscious of the way I draw hearts. But you can also see some other doodles like this one, a little guitar. I actually drew that guitar on my iPad using Procreate. There's a few little illustrations I made on Procreate and then I exported and added them into the book as just little illustrations for the margins. And every now and then you can see I added in just these big giant exclamation points because I was excited about whatever was being said in the book. And as you can also see, these exclamation points right here also have their own paragraph style. So there's a ton of things that I did just to make my life as easy as possible when it came to annotating the book. And I heard some people say like, oh, did you annotate it on your iPad? Like, did you export the PDF and then annotate it on the iPad? I actually tried that and it didn't come out good. Like, it would look okay on the iPad, but then when I would save it and export it again as a PDF, everything was slightly off. Like the way I underlined things like would be bumped up or bumped down, and it just didn't line up nicely. And I found this is the most exact and precise way to do it. So the last thing we need to do once we add in all of our annotations, I swear my book has annotations on almost every single page. Look, we have a little Viking hat right there. That's just what I'm talking about. So if all we have to do is step number 7, which is export with lead. So once you finish all of your formatting, we're going to go to File and we're going to go to Export, and I'm just going to put this as a test so I don't mess myself up. And we're going to go to this right here, which says marks and bleeds. And you have to make sure you have this checked off, which is use document bleed settings. Now, if you sign up for my course, when you sign up for the course, you actually get a template that already has your bleed settings set up for you. So quite literally, when you format your book, you kind of just import everything into the template, which is awesome because you never have to think about any of this. So if you did that, all you have to do is make sure this little box is checked off, and that makes sure that your book is exported with the bleed. So then when it exports all the way to this red line. If that box isn't checked off, then it only exports to this white line, and your book won't print properly and the photos won't look nice. The last thing I want to say is a quick additional tip, and that is to be mindful of who your printer is. So I did all of this work and I put a ton of time into annotating this book, and I wanted to print a proof copy of it quickly to proofread the annotations. And when I went to go upload this file to KDP, KDP kept rejecting it over and over again because no matter what I did to the annotations, KDP could detect that those annotations were text. And of course, KDP knows that you can't have text outside of your margins, but that is the whole point of doing digital annotations, is having text outside your margins. And the whole reason they do this, of course, is for printing quality, to make sure that the text doesn't get cut off. And of course, you just don't want text in your margins typically. But that is the whole point of an annotated book. So I couldn't print my annotated book with KDP, and I got really nervous that I wouldn't be able to print my annotated book with BookVault, which is the chosen printer I had picked for my annotated copy of the book. Now, luckily, when it comes to BookVault, they don't care about all that. In fact, they even say on the page where you go to upload your documents that they don't check anything. As long as the documents fit the specifications for upload, they don't check what the documents look like. So you have to be very careful on how your document looks. You have to do all the work of checking it. They will not check it for you. So that may sound scary, but the good news for me is that when I uploaded this document, which had tons of text in the margins of the book, they didn't care. They printed it. I have not received it yet, so I still have yet to physically look at it and make sure it looks good. But I am extremely familiar with the formatting process and what will and won't work. And I am 99% sure we shouldn't have any issues. They accepted the files. I will say I will have a separate video on BookVault and how that uploading process works. So if you're interested in that, make sure to subscribe. It's coming up very soon. But otherwise, that's going to be it for today's video. And again, be sure to support the book on Kickstarter. There's a different reward and tier level for everyone. Whether you want to just get the ebook or get the annotated copy of the book, there's so many fun things that are being offered. And again, it ends July 29th. Otherwise, I'll see you all in the next video.